17. I guess I'll refer to chair for
this is the December 17th, 2025 meeting of the planning board. We're going to start with roll call. Ryan Belton. Here. Jen Bluestein.
Here.
Alvin Clark.
here.
Alvin Palmisano. Not here. Jamie Pennington.
Here.
Rick Painter.
Here.
Jack McCarr. Here. Matt Heffern.
Here.
Almost double. We have two items in our public hearings tonight. One for Country Club Estates, the other for Next Grid. We'll start with Country Club Estates. This is the second meeting related to this project. We've extended the public hearing to tonight. If there's a representative of the applicant present, if you can come forward and continue your presentation, appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. Commissioner Sam's giving me there. My coworker was here last time, so same person, as you can probably tell. But we have made some changes since the last planning board meeting. So the two of the most significant things are that we have added an access or drive aisle on the left-hand side of the plant on the west side near the property line, so that vehicles can more easily maneuver around the site. I assume, I have discussed this extensively throughout the meeting, so we'll discuss, but I assume the concern is probably you drive down a maneuvering aisle, there's no spaces, you got to back up. So that problem has been addressed with this iteration of the site plan. We've also added some additional landscape aisles, and they are spaced around the existing parking area. A little difficult for me to see the plan right now, but on either side of what is currently the pool area, there are now landscape islands proposed. There's also one on the east side along that long strip of parking side of the property. And I may be missing others, but we have additional landscape islands to limit the number of continuous spaces in a row. Given the changes made to the pavement, we have adjusted the stormwater management system. Not something that is very plan. It's still the same basic idea, but the number of chambers have the impervious surface that is now proposed. There are no parking signs now proposed. Sort of in the middle of the plan, as you see it right now, you can see a drive aisle south of and north of what is currently the pool area. So no parking signs are proposed there. And those are added at the request of the fire department. We have 30 trees now proposed. I believe the previous proposal, or at least the initial proposal, at 6. The number of tree plantings proposed has increased significantly. The tree species proposed are identified on the plan, at the bottom of this plan sheet. And ultimately, this project does propose the addition of 59 parking spaces. So we are required to receive site plan approval from the planning board to do this work because there's more than 5 residential units at the site, and we are creating more than 10 parking spaces. But I believe we have addressed all comments made pertaining to the site plan at the last planning board meeting. But if you have any questions, certainly do my best to answer them.
Any additional questions from the board?
Have we heard back from Phil Christensen as far as the
He did have some comments. I can show those if you want, but he did have a few other details. I assume the applicant had seen or where it goes.
Yeah, so we had submitted the original revised plan last week. I believe it was on Tuesday. And we received another letter the other day, which really only identified one item. It was on the detail sheet. We made a correction to one of the manual details. and we have not heard back since then, but that would be
So again, nothing substantial from the stormwater.
Any other questions?
Just following up on the question from the ADA coordinator, the memo basically says it appears to be code compliant. Do we need to do anything with that beyond, because we had a draft provision in there or something about requiring it to be ADA compliant? So
Yeah, I'm assuming that in this case, if I'm getting corrected, it would be a special condition for that. The
he's basically said he's taking care of it, so.
correct. Yeah. Yeah, I did also confirm previously a week ago or more, but previous time that the dumpster area the concern we had in discussion with this, recognizing there might be some issues there at this location that should be adequately addressed. Just check make sure that this plan was that covering that there wasn't something happening, create an issue for an area that was necessary or needed for some reason. He had basically said this plan address that doesn't create issues there.
Andy, where is that? I did read that I think in your staff memo, but I didn't see where the you talked about screening, right? Of the dumpster. Was that
Oh,
what-
for the dumpster.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Apologies. Your question, I don't see the detail of that here. Typically, there's fencing, there's a concrete pad, right, for dumpsters, things like that, right? So health code, the basic health code requirements that go with that, as well as practical considerations. But in this case, this plan, and maybe to your question, this plan doesn't show that detail per se. Perhaps it's something to get from the applicant to look at. But the health department does require that for those areas, generally speaking.
there is detail on sheet 5.
G5?
It's on the right-hand side of the table. So it just specs a
Oh, yeah.
concrete pad and a cedar fence.
There we go. There's the typical fencing, concrete pad. And again, the primary concern from the planning office perspective, for the health department, this was just making sure that it was there and that the plan there wasn't creating a conflict because the water understanding there were some issues on there with respect to that sort of stuff. We just want to make sure that this.
Couple questions for the applicant. I'm curious about the rows of parking to the left. of This plan, like the pool areas being removed. What was the rationale for putting that landscaped island in the middle of those 2 rows instead, or perhaps in addition to the end?
Well, the intent here is to have parking spaces, so multiple landscape islands really work against the project intent. As far as their location in the middle, we're not necessarily objectionable to moving into the end. We feel those are perfect locations.
And Jamie, I think it's standard in the site plan records to try to limit to no more than 10 consecutive spaces,
Yeah.
but we could waive it. So
Yeah.
if we thought it was better to be at the end, we could waive that requirement.
Yeah, this situation seems to be kind of just odd.
Yeah, it does.
I guess I have a question in general about the parking numbers. And we touched on this a little bit at the last meeting. There's no change in the number of units, residential units in the project. And for a number of years, the project functioned adequately with 180 parking spaces. So now, all of a sudden, there's a request for a 30% increase in the number of parking spaces. And the byproduct of that is you've got an expanded parking lot on the north side of the project, which now extends very close to the property line, very close to the condominium project to the north. And I'm trying to understand the rationale behind so many parking spaces above what's required by the zoning ordinance, and so many parking spaces above what has been functioning for a number of years. Can you help me understand that?
Yeah, so, naturally, I don't live here, on the property, so, my direct knowledge is somewhat limited, but as I understand it, the parking spaces have been identified as an issue in recent years, which is why we have this plan. From what I understand, there are probably more people living in this development than maybe have been previously, with perhaps more vehicles that require additional parking. So that's really, there has not been a change in the number of units. That condo is just seeing higher demand for parking spaces. The other component is there is no maximum prescribed by the zoning bylaw. So, the applicant has sought to increase funding.
Can you address the property line issue? You're 10 feet from the property line with the edge of that parking lot. No screening, no ability to address runoff there other than catch basins and corners. I haven't checked yet any details to see what the curb material is. Is that an asphalt curb?
Yeah, I believe it's Cape Cod berm that would be shown on the,
Which can break down over time. So I'm concerned about the proximity of all of that pavement to the property line without any kind of buffer being created to mitigate runoff, deal with light and noise issues with such close proximity to the property. Can you respond to that at all?
yeah, so as I understand it, there is no requirement for setback in the zoning bylaw. We have adhered to the 10-foot yard setback that typically we provided for structures. So we have tried to create some buffer there. We do have a couple of trees. Obviously, it's not this dense screen, but we have provided some degree of separation here. There won't be any cars parked, directly adjacent to that 10-foot setback because we do have that drive aisle there. So there will be an additional, 20 feet beyond the 10-foot setback of the property line to the actual pavement we have to close right now. So the cars will be set some distance away. The area right now is open, it's just grass. So there's no noise buffering that's provided by the vegetation on the site right now. It's all wide open. Certainly,
But there's this,
there is distance, but certainly there'll be cars that are closer. But we're not removing, a tremendous amount of vegetation adjacent to that property line in order to make this happen. And then lastly, stormwater management. The system has been designed to collect everything. As long as everything is constructed according to the plan in terms of grades, all runoff from the paving surface will be going to the stormwater system and not towards the adjacent.
but you could, given the, I think you said you've just been charged with finding as many parking spaces as you can. You could reduce that number by, 6 or 8 spaces and pull that edge back, away from the property line for no reason why you should do that, really, other than just affecting an arbitrary parking.
We have reduced parking spaces already, and further reduction makes this project less desirable, to be frank. We have incorporated a lot of elements in this plan that otherwise would not be provided. If the applicant were to just repave the parking lot, there would be no obligation to plant additional trees, to provide these landscape islands, to provide a new dumpster pad, to provide the stormwater management system, which is really going to mitigate a lot of the runoff. We have provided calcs that do show a slight reduction in peak runoff rates compared to the existing conditions. Now, I think one thing that's important to keep in mind when we provide those calcs is that to 10, 25, 50, 100-year design storms, 2-year storm, when you hear a 100-year storm after that, sounds minuscule, but that's still over 3 inches of rain. The vast majority of design storms, not design storms, but the vast majority of rain events that you see are far less than 3 inches. So really, course of the year, you're gonna see a lot less rain going towards the adjacent street. So I do think this really provides that benefit, and if, only a dozen additional parking spaces, some lower number can be provided, then the likelihood is far.
Even though there's nothing specific that you're using to determine the parking number that's being proposed.
Right. Well, typically, I've just done planning site plans, you're always designed to the minimum. In this case, the minimum has been deemed to be inadequate, so we are needing to increase it.
Any other questions or comments?
More of a logistics question. So you had a waiver request before you revised the plan? Have you revised your waiver request to reflect the new plan?
We have not provided an updated waiver request, which we should have. Do have that. And there are a couple that I don't believe are applicable. Do you have that waiver request like by any chance?
I can pull it out the open go.
Yeah, so number one is related to providing the landscape plan designed by a landscape architect that request remains. We are showing trees on the plan, but we don't have a landscape architect's plan. Lighting, there are changes proposed, that waiver request remains as initially requested. Number three, environmental and community impact analysis. In my personal opinion, we don't even need this waiver because we're not in any of the zones identified in this section. But I'll defer to the board if you think that's appropriate for us to even be requesting a waiver. Traffic impacts, similar to the landscaping and lighting waiver requests. Actually, changing the use of the site. So we have requested a waiver to that traffic impact analysis. And then architectural style. Again, I'm not sure that we need a waiver for this, in my personal opinion, just because we aren't proposing any modification to the buildings on the site. Proposing any new buildings, we haven't included the waiver request because it is in the zone. So they really all still say it's just a matter of my personal opinion. I'm not sure if we need it.
Also, yeah. Rick?
Just thinking again about this, I guess it's called the western boundary where the parking butts up against the neighboring property. And when I look at the site plan regulations, it's true that there's no step back of the parking area required, but the regulations, the site plan standards say that there needs to be a landscape buffer that is sufficient to screen the property from view. And it goes on in detail about certain things there. So if I understand it, unless I'm just not seeing it, the landscaping that's proposed is basically the two trees. Is there any more landscaping than that that's proposed in that strip?
No, that's the only landscape.
So when I guess I'm just going to the site plan standards, it says a continuous, well, it's between residential districts and or property lines shall requires a continuous landscape buffer strip. And I think I would call this a landscape residential property line. It talks about it should be of a density to substantially screen the development in question from view. It says along the zoning district line in question, but it also refers to property lines. Plantings of various approved evergreen species is encouraged and should be planted at a minimum height of 6 feet. Does this apply in this case?
It actually applies here.
Because it's the wording is kind of, it's sort of it sort of implies the site plan is about a commercial development, not a multifamily residential development, but it does say that there needs to be a landscape buffer strip. And it sounds like it's to screen the parking lot. It talks about plantings of various evergreen species is encouraged and should be planted at a minimum height of 6 feet. And fencing may be allowed in lieu or in conjunction with. So I guess I'm just speaking to that same concern about the parking getting so close, eliminating all that green space and the parking getting so close to the adjacent property. I wonder whether we could discuss that maybe after the public hearing, after the public comment.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess, to follow that, I guess I'd like to look at what's the screening on the other side. Those on the other properties. Because, you know, you can
There's a
say,
building that's very close.
nonetheless, I guess,
Yeah.
my thought is if you're creating a screen barrier, it should somehow be commensurate with what's on the other side. If it's just flat. Yeah, so that one to the more.
Just the golf course, just the.
Yeah, we talked about the property line on the left.
Yeah, these are the. Let's go on with that. Can you zoom in?
So there's a few. Because I guess the point was you'd almost want to augment it, so whatever the gaps are on one side should be filled on the other side versus a permanent screen that would go. If that's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Does seem appropriate where there's the building quite close. to that corner. To provide screening.
I believe that section of zoning is specific to separation of industrial and commercial uses from residential developments. So I don't think it's applicable, given that these are residential developments.
Follow,
Is that,
any follow? Any other questions initially?
The better angle from the other side.
I will open up the floor then for public comment. Just before we get started, we have quite the numbers that we had the last time here. There were a lot of very useful comments the last time, but a lot of comments that address issues that are outside of the purview of planning. So if you could, this evening, if we could focus on the site plan issues and any comments related to that, please come up to the podium, state your name and address, and if we can try to limit your comments to approximately 2 minutes, we can move the hearing along. So if anyone would like to make comments, please come up, state your name and address, and we'd like to hear from you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Frank Clapp. I'm on the board of trustees at the village of Newburyport, which is one of the abutters. I'm also the treasurer. My comments specifically in the direction you asked me. The first thing is this whole development, as I understand it, has been in place since 1970. And now all of a sudden, how many years is that? You need more parking spaces? That's my first question. Someone else asked that too. The second question is wastewater. Just the other day, we had to have the wastewater storage pipe cleaned out again on Woodman Way. I'm extremely concerned that this wastewater treatment plan, that the extra or the backflow going into our storage system on the street is, I think, a real problem. It's already, we can hardly handle what we have. I mean, the people that live here will tell you that it's backing up all the time. And you're talking about putting water in there. Third, on the wastewater, if you look at the pictures, that is a steep drop off in the back and it drops down into a whole wetlands. I'm not sure a little curbing is going to protect that. The next issue is I would like to see a fencing. We have fencing on a car wash that abuts us on, another side of our property. On this side of the property, you have 30 trees on one end, you have 2 trees on the other, no fencing, and you're gonna have this horrible looking parking lot with cars, located very close to our property. I think that's really, aesthetically pleasing or accept. I'm concerned, I know we brought this up last week, there's a rat issue over there with the dumpsters. I don't understand what's gonna happen when you actually excavate and dig up the pavement, if that's gonna cause things to be worse, and is there a mitigation plan for that? And I don't know about fire lanes, but I question how, that's gonna be handled on that plan. I didn't see fire lanes designated to ensure that the fire engine can get in and out and move correctly. And that's what I have.
Hi, my name is Deb Giorgio. I live at 55 Clipper Way, and I too am a trustee of the Village of Newburyport. I work very closely with the Landscape Beautification Committee, so I am all over every inch of our property. And I can assure you that those parking spaces, as those drivers come down the parking lane, their headlights are going to go straight into those units that are on the right side. They're going to go into the sliders and the bedroom windows. So we absolutely are going to need a greater buffer. Right now, our association planted red maple trees along that property line, about 10 feet in a straight line. But behind that, there is a pretty old stockade fence that we paid to put up. And behind that, on their property, is vegetation. All of that is going to disappear, and it's going to severely impinge upon the privacy and the comfort of the people who currently live in those units. So I will ask the planning board to carefully consider what accommodations will be made for the people who currently live on Clipper Way right there. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Jean Haggerty, and I live at 6 Woodman Way. And I'm wondering why there aren't lines and numbers in the parking lot to begin with, so there can be organized parking there. And where are all of these? There might be a few more cars there. When a development is set out, one of the first things that's considered is how many people will there be there, and how many parking spaces we need, and how many guests perhaps parking spaces we need. Right now, it's sort of like a free. Why isn't what is there taken care of? It isn't. And the 2 trees, I don't know if anyone here has been down there. Someone suggested if you took a ride down there and looked at that, there were 2 little trees standing on the lawn, and those trees are at the grace of Clipper Way. So when I hear about all of these flowers that are going to be planted and all of this vegetation that's going to be beautified, I rather doubt it. I think these people that live there long enough have seen the way they're treated as tenants. And it isn't fair. It isn't fair.
Any other comments right now?
Good evening, my name is Rose Chappie. I live at 10 Woodman Way. I would like to echo a lot of what some of the other neighbors have said. We did just back up, the sewer backed up just last week. The city did have to come out and address it at 10 o'clock at night and then again the next day. I mean, it is literally, nothing has changed, but the sewage backs up into our bathrooms. I do believe it backs up into my neighbor's basements. but mine's the first unit it comes into, so I always have to make the phone calls. I've been in contact with the health department. The rat situation has not improved whatsoever. I noticed in the plans, it looks like they want to move the dumpsters closer to the buildings. We're already getting rats in our buildings. They're not properly addressing it, so then they're gonna go dig everything up and make it better. I don't think so. There are a few walkways that flood as we speak, like just with the way the grade is, you can't really see it. There was more trees planted before so around our buildings used to be mulch, now it's rocks. All that runoff now runs into our building and floods. They never replanted those plantings, so everybody can also see in my windows as it stands. So I'm hoping that some of these issues could get addressed, but they're not addressed in there. So it's unfortunate. I also remember about 20 years ago, I think we did have guest parking in front of our mailboxes. We had some like strike off paint so that we knew not to park there, so that our post person could come in and out and park. And then on that back row, we had guest parking so that we could see these cars come and go, knowing that they were just coming as a visitor, so we could distinguish residents from guests. Now, we're supposed to have a parking system as we speak with stickers, and 90% of the people aren't compliant. So, I mean, in a perfect world, I would love to have a numbered parking spot. I don't care where it is in the parking lot. Just tell me which one to park and I'll park there. Thank you. I just want to add one more thing. And their lawyers have still not responded to my lawyers. Thank you.
Giorgio, 55 Clipper Way. I failed to mention that when we get any amount of precipitation, there is a very considerable collection, a huge puddle, about 20 feet long, and it goes from sidewalk to sidewalk. It's about between 3 and 4 inches deep, and it's where the road curves, which would be adjacent to where the new parking is proposed. It's standing water. It takes a good day or so for it to drain. So we already have water issue on Woodman Way. Come take a look when it rains, maybe tomorrow. Thank you.
Someone mentioned the size of the audience tonight, the people that aren't here that were here in the previous meeting. There was very little publication, and I think we're all guilty of that. There was no publication that we found in our building, in their building, about the meeting tonight, and people were very busy at this time of year, as I'm sure all of you are as well. So a lot of people did not know about this meeting, but believe me, the interest has not waned. I can tell you that.
Well, again, it's Frank Clapp. One other thing that hasn't been discussed previously, I believe, is that the whole issue of Woodman Way. Woodman Way is a private way owned by a trust, which no one seems to be able to identify who that is. And the road is it's not plowed, it's not maintained. And again, I'm concerned, and I should consider this, I'm concerned that you're going to allow more parking and change in the runoff and other landscaping changes that, like you said, with the puddle, all of this is not being addressed by anyone in the city, and we still need someone to help rectify from the planning side, what is going to happen with the management of Woodman Way as a private way by the city, because we're abutters, we have no control over the fact that the city issued a private way. I don't know what it's called. I don't know if it's a waiver or whatever, but having a private way there with nobody maintaining it or taking responsibility causes me a concern just with the whole proposal that's on the table. Thank you for your consideration.
Any other comments? Not, then I will close the public comment, and back to the board for any further deliberation. Any other comments? from the board? I'm gonna then make a suggestion. There are written comments now in the file that raise some issues for me that I think we need to consider as a board. And, you know, the issues that have been raised, question the standing of the applicant as a representative of the owners of Country Club Estate. And given that, and given that the approval of a project like this would likely have financial implications for all of you, I don't feel that the planning board is in a position to make a decision on this without the input of the city solicitor. So I'm going to suggest to the board that we continue this hearing to some future date after the first of the year and have the opportunity to get input from the city solicitor relative to our vote to approve a project, given all of the ambiguities of the representation. And if in the meantime, that can be clarified by the applicant, I think that will help the process tremendously. But right now, I don't think as a board, I don't feel like we're in a position to make a decision one way or the other. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through the chair, just offer for the board's consideration, no one, I'm speaking, I agree with Bob, very concerned. I think it's in the wise to do so. But I also just wanted to ask one thing on the site plan. Sorry to mention this earlier, as you were discussing the board members, just asking for. I believe, if I'm mistaken, is this a bike rack? This location, I believe, is that right?
Can you go to the previous sheet? It may identify.
Not really as such, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and that's a very odd location to me. I guess, given the drive out path and so forth, we're just wondering if you could share that. See later, relatively small things we'll get into.
Where is that on the plan?
Sorry, this is if we zoom in. On this location here. Again, it's not necessarily next to something. It's just in an odd place.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any suggestion? I guess I haven't put tremendous thought into the location of bike rack beyond put it there. But I mean, if there's something specific that we can certainly look at. It's adjacent to the drive aisle, so I do see it as accessible, but it could be moved elsewhere.
Yeah, I guess as a general matter, I wouldn't want to put it next to a drive aisle because then you've got a person getting off the bike and going to the bike rack. And there's no sidewalk or anything. So typically what you want to do is put a bike rack closer to an entrance to a building. And you might want to put it behind the sidewalk somewhere, one of those sidewalk areas right there. Just because it's a little bit safer for somebody getting on and off the bike. I don't know how often these racks are used, but it does make more sense to have it out of the travel way.
There is one proposed by Building 14. That's not too far from the entrance. But it perhaps could be moved closer to the entrance.
Yeah. Again, I would, in that case, I would turn it 90 degrees and put it parallel to right up against the sidewalk.
Well,
Yeah, so you come in the sidewalk and your bike rather than park in the middle of the drive aisle.
I understand, we can look at that.
Thank you.
Okay,
Just, what was the point, you were bringing up the point about about clarifying the ownership, right? Was there another point that was just before the bike rack came up?
no other point other than the continue.
I was about to say something.
And that concern that you mentioned comes in a letter to the file.
Yeah.
Can I first of all want clarification just because the comment came up? There is no change proposed to the sewer here. It's strictly stormwater management, looking at the existing drainage in Woodland Way, which is not connected to the sewer. So whatever sewer backups are occurring, yeah, it's not, that will not be impacted by.
Yeah, motion.
Before the motion, could we just kind of go down through the list of things that we've asked to have considered in the next round? Because I think one thing is thinking about the revising the bike rack location. One is looking at the screening, maybe strengthening screening, or at least making sure that the screening on the adjacent property and the screening here works to protect the adjacent property. Were there other items that we asked for?
Potentially moving the landscape island.
Yes, moving the landscape island, considering moving the landscape island.
The ends.
Question for probably the board, but just, if it's at all possible, and again, this is something that the board and the discussion, just in lieu of perhaps shifting that down here, yeah, it's still a long experience. I actually like the idea of sort of clean the ending a bit. I think it's awkward to have a big parking that just leads off and drive on.
Right.
But I'm also not, very keen also on the long expansion. Any shade, for parking, for instance. There's not a lot of landscaping or coverage here in the basement. So in my view, the applicant and, considerations and the other things, you try to make some work with the applicant. But to me, it would be preferable to place those here, but not necessarily taking away these, just off that here consideration.
Um,
And I guess that the continuance would be, how long would the solicitor need to do that work?
That's a question. I don't think we can.
Yeah, just based on the time frame there, the time of the year. I don't think moving, continuing to the 7th of January, and again, partly this is usually an question for the applicant as well, in terms of making any tweaks to the plan. But I think in terms of something like that, I don't think that's likely to be a loop we can close the 7th. I think that's more likely to be something you can continue to do.
And personally, I'd like to see this continue to the 7th, just because if by chance this is able to be addressed by then we can come to the meeting, and if it's not addressed, we'll just request a continuance. You don't need to hear us that night, but of course, that is your decision.
So if you can address the comments, you think by the 7th.
Yes.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, usually the board is expecting a week in advance of the meeting, revised plan, so that would be, from your perspective, it would be uploading something.
Can do.
I can make a motion to continue.
Excuse me, the two hands haven't been
The
raised yet.
public comment has been closed.
We can't comment.
I'd like to, make a motion to continue until the January 7th, 2026 meeting.
Can you speak a little louder here?
I would like to propose, make a motion to continue this, hearing to the, meeting on January 7th, 2026.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passed.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is, next week.
We had a request for a continuance to the January 7th. I think generally speaking, I think they had thought they resolved issues with the fire department. Some of the details, a little bit more detail requested there. I think that was the solution they were trying to close. In essence, part of it came down to just having a little bit more clarity on the plan, condition here together about how much clearance they should keep for any vegetation and things like that, you know, near the seasonal problem. So, certain fire departments might have with batteries, right? So, they just asked that to be clearly normal, if nothing else, yeah, they wanted to make that about the plan, so they could be more, plan a decision, without a whole lot of confusion down the road about works. No vegetation, oh, I should clarify. No vegetation, but also no storage or stockpiling, because they're also concerned, well, that doesn't mean that if you have to pile up all the wood, it's kind of where you are, throw something back there as well. That doesn't help either. So it was meant to have the enforceable conditions of the plan, and probably have some notation more clearly delineating that, and we might also have some conditions. We'll see, comment on that, so that's the reason they've asked.
And have we heard from the Conservation Commission? Is that still outstanding? I didn't see.
Yeah, understanding the Conservation Commission is not an issue here. It's really just not the fire department, working out the clearance. They did have to tweak something on the plan. Insurmountable, it wasn't an insurmountable, like, issue on the plan. It was more issue of some detail. Nothing that would impact is labelers when the plans are on, but the issue that it overlaps with your jurisdiction was really just the fire department. Their purposes.
And just another question, given you brought up the fire department things with the hydrants and so forth, they talk about the testing will take place in March. What is the change? Tested or do we
I don't have the detail on that. I mean, we can check with the fire department details. We can also specify something in the decision, time frames or whatnot, just to make sure we're just focusing, with that sort of thing.
Right, I just heard if there's concern if the testing is not the limit, if it's.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't, sorry, I had an exchange with the chief or the deputy about that particular issue. I did pass them by. So I can really answer that, but we certainly could look into that. We can also try to do that as a declare special condition or something. Well,
Just wonder if there's a concern.
yeah, sure. I mean, generally speaking, there's other permits as well. They're probably not going to get any progress even beyond your approval in advancing it, unless beyond that, even the fire department's happy. So I would check with them and find out, if any progress. Yeah.
I'll move to continue the site plan review application. Public hearing for 23 Low Street to January 7th, 2026.
Second,
All those in favor? Opposed? Global business. We have meeting notes.
Hold on a minute. Do I? We usually do or something.
Yeah. Email me.
We have the 8:20 meeting, which
do we?
are still on here. And all the comments have been.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I don't know. I guess it's a question of whose satisfaction, I guess, only because it's not the best set of minutes, but again, it was done by someone different, covering in front of the board, it doesn't need to be permitting.
it's not, but when I look at this subject, that
Yeah,
there was a discussion of our comments about.
yeah.
So it really wasn't about. particular public hearing.
An active hearing, correct.
So,
Gives me less heartburn. Right?
given that, I would sort of okay with the fact that it generally represented what we were talking about, and that was then followed up with a specific.
Yeah, again, just to be clear, we probably would be using the same note taker basis for, practically just based on. It just wasn't, I think, a good line. This is the person taking notes for permitting where some of the way that felt. There's some other aspects. The way the notes are taken is a little bit much more important.
You could say we're spoiled by our current note.
We have a great note.
So did we get a revised?
Again, we haven't paid, we pay, we get the minutes are reasonably acceptably done, but, again, I don't know that, to your point, I don't know that that's a worthwhile exercise in my view at this point, this exercise.
Is there enough that we have to memorialize without?
In my view, yeah, I agree with Bob, I think it's reasonable that it represents the fact that discussion of those range of issues, and then just leaving it there is probably fine. And if you want to take one further look at it,
I just have a question, because there was one set that I looked at. I stopped after 5 pages. Did we get a revised set after that? I don't remember seeing that.
she had made some tweaks, we can go back, we can,
Happy to move ahead, and I can actually just
yeah.
recuse, I mean, I don't think I read them carefully.
It's up to you either way. We can either follow the next meeting or you can just sort of abstain. We can vote to approve, move on. It's just, I agree with Bob. At the end of the day, it won't make a whole lot of difference at the end of the day. It wasn't anything I think it was.
I would recommend that we vote to approve, given the content and months now. I couldn't go back and look at it now.
Statute of limitations.
Yeah, as much as I would love to be a perfectionist, there are some things that are worth pursuing and some things aren't.
Let's use our energies of it.
Yeah, if we had a hearing that night, I'd be like, all right, we're gonna go back and, the recording is good enough, go through and try to make our own minutes, precisely with everything that was commented on, there's nothing that's gonna be, litigated further from that meeting or like that. So I'm not, like Bob, I'm not particularly worried at this point. It's sort of less for us in terms of like, again, we sometimes have asked the HR department to try to find out a few other folks for, backup note taker. We just happen to not be able to use the other note taker we usually use for our permit board. Wasn't able to do it that night. And so unfortunately, with neither of our usual folks, we had somebody who covers the board that's usually covering, much more conceptual, things that aren't going to be litigated or appealed or anything. So,
I'll make a motion to approve the August 20 minutes as amended.
I say.
All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, 11:13. I sent you comment.
11:13 was not me, because it was Thursday night, is it Thursday?
oh, sorry. That was Diane. Yeah.
I sent comments. I don't know if anyone else.
I wasn't there, so I was
Figured you'd be a saver for that. Yeah, and again, that was unusual. Luckily, Diane is actually did years ago. So she was able to cover that. So again, we found a solution there. But,
So I can never miss a meeting.
We'll just go home. We'll just go home if we don't see you.
Cancel. Yeah.
So can I have a motion related to
Motion to approve the minutes from 11/13/25.
second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Or,
good.
12:03,
Just barely.
Yeah.
12:03, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not sure.
I would
Just right.
make a motion to approve the minutes of December 3rd as amended.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Two updates for me. One remarkably, we're at the end of the year again. Means we have to think about election. So we'll do that tonight, but I think maybe on January 7th, we should think about elections of officers. And, I'm happy to continue. But just so you know, but we should think about formalizing.
Charlie did a really good job here.
Well, you want to let him tell you.
Yeah.
Only Bert is here. I'm coaching there.
Raises the next question is, given the holidays and everything, are there any attendance issues for the 7th? Week after.
I will be able to attend.
Yeah, and is it the next meeting after that as well?
It's the second and
The second. Okay.
the 18th. Second and 18th, I won't be able to attend.
Everybody else generally available.
Thank you. It's helpful. I mean, it was much more difficult, so recently we had to sort of, the CDA, for instance, like, 6 months, it became our first, it's like, that becomes a bigger issue, because actually, every member being able to attend every meeting, is whatever, the only things that I mean, there's a lot of things. But, Story Avenue, we're gonna dive in very heavily into the new, right after the holidays in Story Avenue. And I still have to assess with the city council, sort of how that would work in terms of representation, but I presume there'll be at least P&D sort of defer to the council, appointments in terms of the PA planning development committee that we'll be working with, but obviously as soon as right out the gates, as soon as we have, the council president, and, sort of, that. So, anyway, I'll be, giving you a memo into the city council as well, including within there something I wanted to address with this, which is, we're meeting tomorrow with the water division to talk about, essentially for the areas that we're rezoning over there, the degree to which, how much we can upzone it, so to speak, if you will, in terms of residential count, or how much we can sort of perceive there based on the water supplies we provide today. So we were basically looking at what they can provide, water, sewer plant, think more so water supply is the issue or concern here, but making sure that we're essentially not rezoning or making presumptions about future development patterns there. That would be too much for us to actually do. And so I'm actually glad that we got a little more information on this. We're hoping to close that loop tomorrow, so I can, publish or push this information out related to the zoning here and then elsewhere in the city as a whole, collectively. But basically saying in essence, in total, cumulatively, and this is why it goes back to the one area we really can sort of have a larger meaningful effect on. And I say that because if you look at the city, the MBTA communities is largely spoken for, that's driven, right, mandated, and those build out that could happen. All. We have the potential for Waterfront West, and just a placeholder, put that aside for a second, recognizing that's another zoning discussion that have to happen whole, in itself. And you include, some latitude for things like ADUs, some a little build out that could happen across the town lines related, to our commitments or, sewer and water connections across the boundaries, right? Intermunicipal agreements. The sub result is that it helps to inform us about, what's the cap we might want to consider if we're doing how many units per acre, which parcels are rezoning, and what we're allowing in the total. So the reason I mention that is just because I think, well, originally there was the possibility that the parking rental lot might be at the end of the day, based on the unit count we're talking about and what we're trying to achieve for incentivizing redevelopment. Essentially, we may want to retain the unit count that we're talking about here, essentially for our, Newburyport parcels, and sort of put up as a placeholder for a second the possibility of that. But to me, it may behoove us to sort of focus on and utilize that density that may be possible. But whether it's a 3-story or 4-story, for instance, it may be beneficial for us to sort of retain that some of that density or allowance for option, mainly so because it helps us to incentivize someone to over time redevelop. So anyway, that's a brief mention, but I think here, as we'll dive into the zoning discussion, we'll be working with our consultant, subcommittee group, and be this reference point to the overall build up, capacity that we should sort of keep in mind, hopefully on a go-forward basis. And that was one of the things that in the next budget, I'm asking the mayor and city council for some funds we can call it to the 2027, well, it would be the 10-year master plan update. So to roll into that. I would like that to be of course, the story component and sort of overall build out of the city. I would like that to be part of the consideration of the city in the master plan process, right? Recognizing the sort of cap, at least from that, no other limitation in water supply, maybe. Sort of thinking about that a little bit, and also the sort of resiliency, sustainability component. So having all these hazards, and, civil rights and so forth, getting worse, we should probably. Those are just, some things that might be good for us to take a look at. Hopefully the city council, the mayor and the city council will appropriate funds, allowing us to engage a consultant, giving a little more resources for the planning department to work with you and the city council to do that plan. And checking in sort of where we are in 2017 in terms of things we've done, which things we need to work on. Some of them related to planning and use things like that. Functions, but those are two things that. And again, one question. The only other things I would mention is ZBA is largely some of you were. They've wrapped up their public hearing process. They're continuing to the 12th of January and then possibly likely again to the 14th, 2 days later, to talk about essentially what would be the final decision probably on the project. So they outlined roughly what they're talking about. For the plans, they're all roughly the most recent plans that are posted. But the main thing that they were talking about is the condition or things that might need to be addressed really comes out of that intersection. And so really what's being talked about now is the Hawk crossing with a refuge island. I think effectively ends up being the sort of 5-foot shoulder bike lane width because there is the what they're tracking for is a requirement for turning lane into the site. So if you're heading down Story, if you're going down Story Avenue, eastbound, you can turn into the plaza on the left lane. Incidentally, or maybe perhaps importantly, to me, it seems awkward to have left signal control, but that is not necessarily going to be required. It's all that wasn't said. In essence, that is where the board is tracking right now. It's the left-hand turning lane. There's a sketch that shows this most recent plan that they've uploaded, about a couple of plans back, and so that seems to be where they're tracking in that detail. So if you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, in terms of the parking layout, Sean aside all that, they weren't really tracking for any tweaks or changes to that from the plans that were most recently posted. So we'll look at that. And, if they haven't already, that looks like we're tracking right there. For our purposes, we might say, right, that's the edge of the, rezoning the driveway, sort of roadway effective block we're trying to create. That would be the edge that we're working with. That changes. That's the edge we're working with rezoning and development from there. Elsewhere.
Andy, I was watching the ZBA meeting the other night, and you mentioned there are kind of two different plans for the exit. One is left turn lane and the Hawk signal with no refuge island, and that preserved the 5-foot bike lanes. Mm-hmm. And the other one was putting the refuge. The other plan they've shown has put the refuge island in and eliminated. Yeah. And there was some discussion, and I was getting very worried because there was discussion. And I know our consultant has said definitely need to keep the bike lanes. So you need to widen the pavement. Yeah. And push the curb back. Yeah. But I'm just worried that the ZBA, we're seeing talk about those two alternatives. Should we have a refuge island? Not recognizing that a couple of the members seem to recognize it, but not recognizing that if we add a refuge island, we have to take land away from Port Plaza in order to preserve the 5-foot bike lanes on both sides. Not take land away, but move the curb. It doesn't take land away, but it moves the curb so that the sidewalks get.
Yeah, understood. And here, again, as of right now, again, before I made a final decision, but where they're tracking the discussion of conditions, they're expecting the roadway to be widened on the south side to accommodate the left turn lane. So, yeah, if you want to hang on a second.
Initially, they said the model that had the left turn lane I didn't think was widening. I thought it was just using existing pavement, but.
So while you're looking that up, you know when they have to finish? Isn't there a time element they have to meet?
Sorry, for the decision, you mean?
Yeah, for the decision, the final.
Yeah, I believe it's the 17th or something like that, of January before. Yeah, it's like only a couple days after, so they're kind of using other time.
Yeah.
So, this is one of the sketches.
That's
it
the
shows
original
left-hand
one.
turn lane.
With the 2 foot shoulders.
Yeah, so I guess your point is, you're worried that they'll losing the shuffle here with the presumption that there's the island, and that in this scenario, there still would only be two, right?
Yeah, so they're eliminating,
Yeah.
they're basically cutting the shoulder in half.
Yeah, the board, and again, I certainly can look at this further with the board, they haven't issued their final decision yet, so it's good, but as of the last meeting, they were working or tracking with this being in here. What I was hoping, and maybe perhaps your point, is that there'll be clarity in this to require it to be 5 feet here.
Kevin was very clear that he wanted to keep the 5 foot shoulders on both
Yeah,
sides.
yeah, and I'm certainly supportive of that myself. I mean, well, you know, you could talk about the benefits of widening further here and having that islands. If I had to choose between the two, I would choose the bike lane or the refuge island. But again, you could talk about having widening to accommodate both of those two, or to have a smaller, you know, as long as this is too small or functional, like having a smaller refuge, you know. So there's the balancing act there for sure. There could be a sort of pinch point essentially created here, you know.
I think Kevin's point was that the ideal situation is to take 6 feet away, move the curb back 6 feet.
Yeah.
In order to.
And unfortunately, that is not tracking. So I think the sum result is that the only place there's sort of maneuvering room that I can see between the applicant and the board they've discussed anyway, because it would be just to compromise perhaps this refuge island. Because the widening that they've discussed, at least thus far, they should left internally is only to this point right here. So.
But there's not even, I don't think there's even a widening there. I think they're reallocating space. I think they're reducing the 5 foot shoulders or whatever they are to 2 feet, and they're using that to create the 10 foot left turning lane.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So in order to do that left turn lane, you have to take land from the north side.
So the refuge is irrelevant at that point. The left turn lane stands, it's still going to require space to be taken. Right?
Yes, but again, I'm not to work because you get involved in everything. But is it possible that you and I perhaps could follow yet tomorrow on some of the details, looking at the plan, and then recognize that it's still as best we can, you know, within the crafting conditions based on the mishmash of plans or sketch plans that are showing different conditions.
Yeah, I think Kevin might have had a plan that showed.
But that might be good. So I'd love to be able to work it again. I'd love to craft essentially what you're referring to at the end of the day, work to make sure that isn't missed in the shuffle anyway. Especially given that where they're in part describing something that's in between drawing sets to some degree, like no plan shows perfectly what's being described or being expected here. And they didn't do a fully engineered plan here per se to show all these, right? These are sort of schematic. It might be good to, you know, be as clear as possible. So happy to do that.
Sure. Yeah, tomorrow afternoon. Would be good.
Yeah. Okay.
Why don't you let me know a time? I'll be back around 2:30 or something.
Thank you.
And full signalization has been excluded.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they wouldn't have gone there if the consultant felt, you know, again, in the review, it might have been strong concern there, but the consultant wasn't as concerned about it. So it wasn't clear, you know, in the end discussion whether that was something to, you know, look at that as well. But I think in a large part of nothing else, the consultant pointed to that and saying that's very good for like left internally. Then pointing to that, and the consultant was saying with a left hand turn lane or otherwise, like controls were needed. My own concern with this is just that it does control pedestrian traffic this way, but recognizing all the other movements that are happening here, it's not really these folks, you know, directly right. So this, and so it's still open ended a little bit, you know. Pedestrian, you know, depending on what's happening here, at different points in time, there's not complete control of what's happening in movement. So, you know, not ideal, I guess, there, my opinion, but I also had a totally different, you know, vision longer term of this area. I think it could have been a smaller roundabout with a one lane, you know, simple pedestrian crossings, you know, no signals with, you know, again, that's not what they put all here. So, yeah, thank you. I agree with the comment. And I'd love to make sure it's one or the other. Is that? Yeah, think that was it. Oh, sorry, just the only other thing was the ADUs. You guys had on ADUs, the committee, there was the thinking that that would perhaps be the calendar year. The request for some legal guidance was made for the non-conformances aspect of the whole thing. And so unfortunately, the city council did not get the, guidance we were looking for. We needed. They need a little bit more time, so we had a discussion about it today, and that's holidays. You're made clear the time is of the essence. So the some result is that if we're able to close that loop and that feedback comes back, they do planning development, city council will look at that issue again. Presumably they could still take action in January, which is their time frame to just, should say February. Maybe one more meeting in February. But if that doesn't happen, if there's not closure with legal counsel working out these issues, they might be back to you at the hearing. The only other thing I would mention with that is that the more on the non-conformances, if you're interested in it, you may want to track that discussion forward. Questions. Some of the discussion right now is essentially about if you want to use those pre-existing non-conforming structures that are closer to a lot line, and again, recognizing they're already there, they might be used for different things today. It could be a shed, it could be a workshop, it could be a living space above a garage, with an entertainment room. Choose, whatever the arrangement is there, it could be something. This debate over essentially adaptive use of those spaces, and so does it require some sort of review? Is that what kind of review process is involved with that? And fly versus the beginning, and some of that spectrum is the area that's being debated right now. I think in that aspect anyway. The other aspects of the committee and sort of come to you working with, but that was the piece that was sort of left open for some further legal guidance and discussion.
Is there any delay with the changing council, the city's changing council?
I think only in the sense, in my mind, only in the sense that we have to make sure that we ramp up as quickly as possible with new councilors, because per se incoming, again, not knowing the composition will be exactly that is harder to in fairness to them. They're being asked to sort of ramp up very quickly, go out on something to get that time to look at it globally. It's a new area of land use anyway, so I mean, even for recognize, we recognize there'll be new case law created a year or two from now, or 5 years from now, some area of this, and we have to do something before that. So, I think mainly for them, it's just that they're not, looking at this issue and they have any concerns, they need to speak quickly.
And also legal counsel is changing too, as well.
Yeah, I think the whole year is that we're going to bring this across the finish line, to pressing counsel, again, and that's part of the reason why I'm really concerned today. But at any rate, that's part of my concern. But I mentioned that if for any reason that fall through, for any reason, if close out the board, they get the advice back, and still continue to debate internally about this stuff. You might be having another hearing again only because the clock has to reset, even if it's not, nothing new has come up as an issue. You might have to just start over again. So again, we'll balance that procedural stuff with, policy debates.
Shades of short-term rentals, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to read the 3-year record on short-term rentals.
Is there no deadline in the statute like there was for the BTA Community Act? There's no.
This one doesn't have that. It's just immediately you need to be in compliance essentially. So
Denied an ADU, if someone denied an ADU, because
the sub result is that if someone says they're agreed by the ordinance, it then becomes a question of, is there going to be something that is unenforceable in the ordinance because it's not caught up to compliance essentially? Whereas then we take communities, there was a deadline you have to submit for their formal review and approval.
Right.
In this case, it's just everybody has to comply with the standards. Then you're having a debate about whether you're a local ordinance because they're all written differently. Of course, they're all written differently and some of them are structured differently. So finding the pieces that are related to the thing that's going on here, you have to read the entire ordinance to see where they are. Especially with things like non-conformances, whether something requires a special permit or something. It's going to be a variety of things everywhere. So it didn't have that full review process.
and our in-law ordinance is already non-enforceable, right?
Well, we've already amended to get rid of that in place of the ADUs.
That's right.
It's just that there's still some areas in the ADU ordinance that should be updated to meet the state requirements. To be consistent, yeah. And frankly, some of this is parallel with discussion we had right before the adoption of the first piece. It was just that the state hadn't finalized their regs. We were shortly thereafter going to be adopting them. And frankly, they also issued further supplementary guidance, clarifying and further expanding on some of the areas for the regs. So, yeah, slide decks or sort of presentations, right, where they've given a little bit, they've elaborated a little bit further. So with that information in mind, it becomes a little bit clearer now certain things are not in compliance or should be updated to be in compliance, so to speak. So in one or the other, we should be doing that. Unfortunately, we got sort of, waylaid on one aspect of the updates or the tweaks that were being done to the ordinance. Piece, some of the other pieces were sort of primed and ready to go, maybe at the end of the year. We decided to carry on, do one efficient update, hopefully in January, rather than closing the loop on this cycle, adopting something, and then still having to start progress. That would close the loop on that. So again, the council, all of us, they were hoping to kind of bring it across the finish line in January, not have to sort of 4 months. In my view, irrespective of this point, it's sort of acceptable, not have an opinion one or the other. We just, give the guidance, take the opinion, we'll see what the case lines are. We need to make a decision, and I do think we should do it within the time frame we have here. We starting the clock just because we're sort of waffling on what the guidance would be. So anyway, we'll, can sort that out along you guys do well, and whether or not we have a poll here, it's maybe.
We were discussing the possibility of a group site plan visit on Highland Ave before the next meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it seems like the kind of complex project, and I know in the old days, planning board used to do site visits.
Yeah, it's been a long time. For bigger projects, it's not uncommon. Generally speaking, the main thing, the most important thing, and I defer to you on scheduling, we can make a time or whatever works. Make sure, we're coordinating the property, but it's just making sure you're not deliberating in any shape or form regarding the application, going there, asking for information about what's happening on the plan, where things are, factual kind of stuff, sense, ask some questions here. But please don't talk amongst yourselves in deliberation format because that undermines the process. Slow, so and that's just one reminder, and again, we should know that's one of these. But keep those discussions, deliberations.
So I don't know, do other people feel like this would be a useful thing to do?
I think it'd be great, and it would be noticed too, right? So
yeah,
if you want to pick a time, again, if you want to pick a time, now because everybody's in the same room. It's a lot faster to pick when everybody's in the room than it is to do an email exchange or later on. But if you want to look for something now or later, whatever works.
I could go out there, go to the site and walk it all, and the one thing I'll say is seeing it is really different than what we heard. Like these teeny little houses where this thing's got to encroach, those houses on the side are massive, all 3 stories. There's some smaller houses down on the other side, but they use every available inch. They're the ones, they're dominant in that site. It's not the other way. So that's my reflection when I went. So everyone should have an opportunity to see it that way or see it. I don't think photos would show that.
Saturday morning.
so I guess the other thing is, would we want to, I guess we would want to invite the applicant's representative so we could ask questions.
Yeah, where is something going, right?
Yeah.
Factual, mainly, stuff as opposed to also evaluating anything or giving, where you stand on the issue. But yeah,
How much time do we need for notice?
48 hours is typically what we use for notice. Just to be clear, I'm not, again, we can have further discussion. I'm not convinced that a mere site visit, when all you're doing is looking at the site, needs that notice. I think that's more of an abundance of caution.
But it'd be a public meeting, right?
What's that?
It would be a public meeting.
Just to be clear, in my experience, that is not an actual public meeting, again, because the whole point is you're not deliberating, you're not supposed to. I would, out of the abundance of caution, I would post it as a best practice. Yeah. By just clarifying, I'm not sure that is required legally, provided you guys are actually going for the site. But I do think an abundance of caution makes sense to do so and just post it in the meeting and recognize that you're not deliberating. I think that's better because it shows as much transparency as possible in the process, especially if the residents saying, "Oh, board members, they're talking with the applicant or seeing them at one point." It's not some kind of so.
We're recording public comment. We're not listening, but
you're really just familiarizing yourself with
Yeah.
existing conditions and where things are going to be, how they relate to each other in the field, right? And that's the reason we do as a body. It's just that get the same information simultaneously from an applicant, that sort of thing. It's just you're not deliberating and
The other thing is, it might be helpful to have their revised plans, because they were gonna make some tweaks, I think. Right?
Yeah, I think the main thing that, well, there might be some tweaks to the plan for sure. I think the main thing you're missing is some architectural, but I also got the impression from the comments you're gonna get some tweaks to the plan. So
Right.
it's up to you whether you want to wait to see something like that before you go out there and maybe compare against that.
I guess it's not critical.
You may want to do it close to the meeting, only because you might have something like that in hand.
Yeah,
Or going to
But
the.
we also get snow.
Right.
Which makes it harder to see.
That's right. Taking advantage of that weather.
and
It's up to you.
there's no snow predicted for the next week. So.
You all, I mean, you can also get back to us, or just let us know, or we can certainly generally let us know, when we can just post it, you know, whatever the time is, daytime, evening, whatever it is.
For me, it would be Saturdays and Sundays. During daylight.
Send you out there with a headlamp.
We probably don't have enough time to notice it Saturday meeting.
As of right now, no.
Anybody have a time?
Saturdays or Sundays would work for me.
Yeah.
When are they back in front of us on the 7th?
Between Christmas and New Year.
27th.
7th is 3 weeks from now.
It's also a very challenging time. To do it. I'm not hoping to be there, but if it was happening, I would probably try to go. But they are back in front of us on the 7th.
Yeah.
I mean, the 3rd.
I mean, at that point, you probably have at least the updated information, which might give you more at work when you're out there, because you're gonna wanna maybe that placement in the field, at that point, you wanna do it closer to.
You want to try tentatively do it on the 3rd?
So sorry, Saturday the 3rd, is there a specific time that?
And
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so we'll post it at 10 a.m. 1:30, and we'll reach out to the applicant just to also there, just to, you know, make sure. And not that it's already in there, but also just kind of make sure they can reply where things are, so let it mirror this. Yeah.
Excellent.
And if for any reason, I don't know what it be, but if for any reason they're trying to make that work, but I assume they're gonna make it work, so it's in their own decision.
I have one more question. Different topic. I was, for some reason, looking back at something from last year, and I saw a note saying that Andy Port, planning director, said that the Haley's project would start in the spring of 2020. So, do you have any update for us?
You should ask. Yeah. Did have a conversation with Lou a few days ago, maybe a week or two back. I actually talked briefly with the building commissioner today. And based on what we left, I had a pretty big exchange. I literally, as I was leaving City Hall, and we were just, I do need to follow up with him tomorrow morning about that. But again, it's going to be really a question of whether he's getting shoveled again in the spring, or whether he wants to go any further. And I will tell you as soon as I know the answer to that. But I definitely, from my discussion with Lou, got the impression it's next season for sure. What's unclear to me is exactly whether that means early spring or whether that means fall. He was still having some of those same hesitations and concerns about the market, and which project coming online and offline. I was asking, with recognizing, say, the Kmart, the saturation of units and all that kind of stuff, timing when coming, starting construction versus finishing that occupancy, that might let a fire get going now, I don't know. But so I imagine we'll have a better answer tomorrow, because I know that Greg was going to talk with him as well. And so, our permit, that piece, I think, is the piece that we need to check in right at this moment. Our piece is more, if the applicant has a little more time, there's been, even permit extensions have been given because of various reasons. So it's not really our end, but we all want to see that, and putting aside anything else that was, there was some discussion with the SHI and then, timing and whatnot. So at any rate, I did talk with them. He was like next year for sure, but not showing exactly when in the year. And of course, I was as soon as possible, right? But I'll have to ask, given that the building commissioner is going to talk.
You should just say spring and not say what year.
I mean, for some of us, doesn't it? It feels like it's like to go. Right? It's like,
The first project.
oh, was that the first? Yeah, I mean, again, like I realize now it's a bit of a vaccine before we are original adoption process, then the 1 and 3, but like to me, 166 seems like it's been a couple of years, you know? So I think a lot of us are sort of like, we'd like to see something starting to happen there. So yeah, I will, try to get an answer tomorrow afternoon once I know Bill and Chris again was going to talk to them. That's schedule.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn,
Seconded.
second.
Second.
You went first, you went first. All those in favor? Thank you.